Welcome. We all know the flat Earth theory is garbage. No one actually believes it besides the craziest of the crazy. Obviously, it's not true. It's ridiculous, but that doesn't mean that the spherical globe Earth is the correct or the end all be all to it. That's still up for debate. Obviously, alternative Earth shapes are a bit laughed upon, but that's just because of the flat Earthers. Because obviously, obviously, there's the third dimension. To Earth. It connects. The surface connects. The surface doesn't end. Right. So, but that doesn't mean that it's a sphere or like a kind of off sphere. Like their explanation is that like the sphere, the the Earth is a little bit wider around the equator than like up top, so it's a little off. It's not perfectly spherical, but whatever. There are some actual convincing alternative Earth shape theories. I'm gonna point out three that I find particularly convincing. This first one is a thick Earth. It looks great. We can all admire this Earth. What this really explains that the spherical Earth can't is that, like, why life landed on Earth? Why not Mars? Why didn't it go to Mars? Why didn't it go to Venus? Why didn't it go to Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, whatever? Obviously, if your life in some primordial state, you're gonna want to go to the thick Earth rather than like these obese looking planets like Mars and Jupiter. Venus, no. Obviously that explains why it landed on Earth, because spherical Earth has no draw. Thick Earth, now that's a planet we want to go to. And it also explains because obviously thick Earth is going to be great at reproduction. That explains why life is so ubiquitous across the planet. Why there's so many varieties. You think like obese Mars, obese Jupiter could reproduce life at that rate? Of course not. Of course not. Spherical Earth was basically obese Earth. At this point we have thick Earth. Obviously, the better explanation. Obese Earth, also known as globe theory. No, there's no reason any sort of life is gonna drop down on obese Earth. That's just ridiculous. Wow. Okay, now this next one is also a great one. It's actually Dick and Balls Earth. This one, of course, is called Dick and Balls Earth because it sort of resembles Dick and Balls, but this makes a lot of sense because comets. What are comets with water and like life on it that would land on Earth? I mean, they're basically eggs waiting to be fertilized. Of course, they're gonna go to the phallic-shaped planet. That just makes sense. And much like thick Earth, obviously, Dick and Balls Earth is just gonna bleed life fluid. Also explain why there's so much variety on this planet. Why reproduction is so great. This explains also why Australia's like way the flub down there. Obviously, perfectly explains why the ice cap is at the tip of the Earth, to say. Obviously, some dried out life force as the rest of the planet really thrived in the life juice. The pole kind of got a little too much and kind of drowned out any life. So that's been slowly being reclaimed. It also explains why the Earth is continually, over time, the northern hemisphere is actually rising. Places like Sweden, places like Norway, Greenland are actually rising. This is unexplainable with globe theory. That doesn't make sense because they make up the going theory is that massive glaciers are to blame. But of course, that doesn't make sense because actually ice is less dense than water. So the water that was displaced by these glaciers, these massive glaciers, they say were like all across America and Europe, and went down all the way to Spain and like Florida, and that's why that massive amount of weight. But that doesn't explain that ice is actually less dense than water, which means it actually weighs less than water. So the Earth is actually, the northern hemisphere, as you can see, is actually rising. And this is measurable, but that's not explained by globe theory, because globe theory should be widest and only rising actually at the equator. That's the only thing that makes sense. Why is it widest at the equator but also growing upwards? This is the biggest flaw of globe theory. But of course, Dick and Ball's theory explains this perfectly, because Dick and Ball's Earth actually grows upward, and that makes sense. That just makes sense. Gravitational pulls, and of course, life force explodes at the top and drips down, basically. Life fluid explodes at the top and slowly trickles down. That's why. That's perfectly explained. The only way that makes sense. Obviously, the most convincing argument for Dick and Ball's theory. And this last one is actually my personal favorite. This is my belief. This is actually the most convincing, honestly. We have Squidward Earth. Yes, Squidward Earth is a probably the most convincing one here. The other two do explain a lot, but like to go over it, like obviously any comet, any asteroid with life on it, with life, water, whatever, is gonna land on Squidward. It doesn't matter what any other planet shape is gonna be. Squidward's the top, so I mean it's always gonna land on Squidward. And Squidward is just a unlively person, but because he's so unlively, he actually transmits life. He's a very lively person, but he doesn't show that. And because he doesn't show that, he actually transmits his liveliness to his surroundings. So when life lands on Squidward, that life gets his liveliness. It just permeates through this life, and then that's why there's so much life on this planet. That it's why there's so much biodiversity. That just explains it, really, first and foremost. And of course, that's basically thick Earth right there, and Dick and Ball's Earth. Obviously, Squidward has a bulbous head, and that explains. And he's a very smart guy. That clarinet. Obviously, you need a lot of brain space to play instruments. So as he gets better at the clarinet, which has been a very long and arduous process, but of course, just because he's slow to pick up, that doesn't mean he's creating any less brain matter. So his brain matter is actually expanding the northern hemisphere. That's also a very valid explanation why Norway, Greenland, Sweden, that's why they are rising. That's probably the most valid explanation for that. Absolutely. And of course, this perfectly explains why Australia, which is actually his nose in this representation. Australia is always put off to the right, and not on the bottom, but like kind of off to the right. Sort of in the bottom in the southern hemisphere, but of course we all know Australia is like directly below everything. So obviously this doesn't make sense on globe theory, because Australia is just not in the right place. But of course, Australia is Squidward's nose. When you realize this, everything just makes more sense. It's on the bottom, it hangs down. It's so dense that it actually goes underneath Squidward's chin. And this explains why some parts of Australia are more on the side, really, yes. This really explains everything. This explains why Christopher Columbus took so long to reach the Caribbean, because clearly that's the widest span of ocean on Squidward Earth. Really, it is. He just happened to have bad luck and chose the longest path. If he went up, obviously you can see Iceland in the middle of America and Africa. Really, really ideal. Squidward theory also explains why the sun is yellow. Because, of course, Squidward has his companions, Sponge Man and Patrick. Sponge Man, of course, is yellow, and it explains perfectly why the sun is actually yellow. You'll see it during the daytime. The whole idea that stars are white and that suns are white and the sun is white is just utter nonsense. It really is utter nonsense. Another really just a facet of the white supremacist culture that we've been living in for so long. So sphere sun and white sun, of course, they see that as the ideal shape. We don't buy that. We all know the sun is yellow. We all know sun square. And we all know Squidward Earth is actually the true explanation. Like I said, this is my personal opinion, so I'm definitely on board. This explains why when you look out into the stars at night, you see them glistening pink. You see them glistening pink all the time. All the time. They just do all the time. Sometimes you'll say, okay, sometimes they're a little bit white, aren't they? No, that's just atmospheric distortion, really. Atmospheric distortion. It really scatters the reds and the pinks. Really, it does. And that leaves like a whitish color. But I mean, why is it that shape though? You know, if stars are supposedly spherical, why are they star shaped? You know, to our eyes, like Patrick's star shape. Obviously, that's something that's not explained by globe theory, but of course, Squidward theory trumps all. This is really the end-all be-all explanation to the alternative science crowd, which isn't in the pocket of these major corporations that are, you know, a lot of people make a lot of money off globe theory. Cruise ships can make it seem like your trip is going to be super long and super expensive, but really things are closer than they seem. Airline companies do the same thing the exact same way. Obviously, the idea that you need a car to transverse large land masses is ridiculous on Squidward theory. It really is. So, I mean, like, the auto industry is in its pocket. It really is. The tourism industry, they want everything to seem more exotic than it actually is. Things are a lot closer than they seem. It really is. And, of course, Australia is trying to form a legitimate government, and obviously them being just like the bottom, the big nose of Earth, really is not something to be respected. So, I mean, obviously they're fully into globe theory rather than the true Squidward theory. And these are facts, these are truths, these are the best representations, the best three, and of course, Squidward theory being the absolute truth. I think we'll find this out in the next 100 years once they finally actually get into space. Of course, the moon, there are a lot of theories about the moon. Obviously, it's true that they've never been there. I'll have to do another video about the moon. I'll definitely do it. There are a lot of theories going around. I'm doing research, so I'll get to that later. Anyway, remember to expand your mind and don't accept everything as fact. Obviously, people are going to try to take advantage of your obstinate brain. Don't let them do that. Think outside the box. Take in the facts and make your own decision. Squidward Earth forever.